Alright, sorry my table's a little messy. Get my milk out of here. Yeah, sorry my table's a little messy. Basically, decided to make a video of all my tries and failures and things that happened over the last year that just, what the hell when you're teching, you know. Basically, if you're watching this video, I'm going to tell you certain things that will pretty much just give you a little bit more experience if you don't know what you're doing or are not advanced at what you're doing. First to go off, I've made a list, and this is basically just long junk, so this is probably going to be a long video. I'm just going to talk about the numerous things of buying products and looking at it and assuming that it's good to go, and you're like, I think it will work, but then it doesn't. So I'll give you an example here. A lot of these problems happen when I started working with building a Dsg, and the reason for that is because of the numerous different brands, and the parts just don't drop in. You always have to do some kind of modification here or there. So we're going to start off with a bent SHS tooth rack at the front. So here's an SHS tooth rack. See, it was cut for a Dsg, and what I mean by that is if you look at this piston, it's bent in the front, and it's kind of hard to see, but the tooth rack is really bent. This has been epoxied, and so it's on there good, but what it does is it bends your spring. So you got your gun in there set up, you're shooting, and everything sounds great, but then you start hearing this weird noise. It's like a rattle, and you open up and your spring is basically, I don't have it with me right now, it's probably over there somewhere. Your spring is supposed to be straight like this, but it's probably like this when you get it out. Yeah. The reason for that is because even if you allow the spring to rotate, it's bit in the front here, so it's rotating and bending in there. So talk about bad luck. The thing is I knew it was bent because I pulled the rack out after I had bought it, and I'm just like, fudge, I don't want to waste any more time. It's just not worth it. I had bought another piston that was a clear blue with a solid teeth rack, and supposedly it was a piston that was supposed to work with the Dsg, but it did not because it didn't have the support here. It wasn't a strong enough piston, and it just broke off the pickup tooth. Had nothing to do with AOE being corrected, it was just that. So going from one piston to the next, and I start to realize that you just get bad luck sometimes, really bad luck. And so this was part of an example there. I thought, hey, if it's bent a little bit, maybe it won't cause a problem, but utter failure. It definitely did. Other things that I had problems with, I had a pinion meshing with the Dsg Bevel Gear. I originally wanted to use this shell. This is a G&G GR16 shell, and it's definitely different than a TM Tokamuri compatible. So I dropped the Dsg bevel in here, and you can see I've sanded it down and grinded it down just to make space, because it would just grind into the shell. And the reason for this is because the motor's pinion could not get to the proper meshing point, and it just was not possible. And me, being I just don't want to fuddle around and buy anything else, decided I'd just go ahead and try to get down as much as I can. Now, as I removed it, I started to realize if I go any further, there's not going to be anything left for this shell. So obviously it just almost reaches, but it doesn't, and so the decision was made, it's just not worth it. So to talk about that is kind of like, if you know it's not going to fit and you're close to it, it looks like it's going to, don't even try. It's not even worth it, because what's going to happen is you're going to cut it down, and then it's going to seem like it's perfect, but when you go to test the meshing and so forth, you're like, oh shit, I can't do this anymore. So it just couldn't be done. Selector meshing needed special modification. Well, gosh, good example is this one over here. This is my Ares G36. I opened it up, and here is a blue Lonix with the back indented, not the pickup tooth, just the back. So what happens is I'm using the anti-reversal latch button, and the gears spin backwards like this, but it was a powerful spring, so it just boom hits into the back of my piston, and I pull the piston out and there's an indentation in the back. So it still works. It's still got a small tooth for the pickup. So basically the meshing that I'm talking about though is here is sometimes like these don't mesh correctly. You put it in your piston, close your or you put your piston in, you close your gearbox down, you tighten it, and you try to rotate the sector, and like it will start to go smoothly right here, but when it gets to the metal teeth, it just like it's a little tough here, and then just goes through. Now normally if you just run this, it will mesh it eventually, but if you want your motor running efficient right now and get it done, what I'll do is I'll take this out and look at why it doesn't mesh and slightly grind down the teeth into a certain way so that during a hand test it will just do that perfectly. No problem. So the motor will not be working at all, and it's already pre-done, ready to go. Very smooth. Here we got this aluminum one. This really sucks because the teeth rack is too low. It's a nice piston, but it's just too low. Heavy piston, it would be good just for like a slow rate of fire. So we got here, comes up, hits it, and it pulls it back. It looks like it's perfect, but when we shut the gearbox shell, this can actually move the sector. So like right here, there's no teeth, put the piston in, and I can actually do this, and the sector moves. So it's just way too close. I'll try Lonex, fits in perfectly. It cannot do that. What it's wrong is the rack. It's just coming down too far. And for me, it's like I really don't want to buy any more things. I really don't want to wait. So I try to do something extreme by dremmeling both sides a little bit down, here and here. And as I'm doing that, I just do a little bit, and I notice, okay, it's still not budging. Like it's not even going. So I'm like, I know from my previous experience, if you go any further, it's not going to have anything to grab. So it's not going to be able to go through the teeth to teeth. So I just stop, and I'm like, this is not going to work. And I'm just depressed about the whole thing, because now it's like, well, I did want to modify this a little bit, but now the teeth are a little bit shorter. They still will go through here. They still will go through here. I checked because the shell has a little peephole to watch the meshing. Yeah, you just, to see a problem, you need to see it. So you can see I have the peephole right here for the meshing, and so get that away from underneath this barrel. So as you rotate it, I noticed that the rack here is just way too low. It's just hitting into here, so I'd have to remove massive amount of teeth space, and it's just not going to be worth it in the long run. So now that I have clipped this down a little bit, we take this piston that has the marking in the back, and we run it through, and it will shoot. It's going to be no problem. But let's say I want to use the anti-reversal latch button. So here we are. We've got the piston ready. It shoots, and let's say it has overspin right there. Is your overspin. We're going to say all the way towards the back. So if I was to let the anti-reversal latch pull, it would sling like this at a very fast momentum, would build up and just come back like this and hit into the back of the pickup. Now, I already knew I would try some Sorbo or something, cut some O-ring just a little bit and glue it on there in that section like that. Basically a little dampen pad, some type. Where's my Sorbo at? Right here. So I would take this and cut this and just glue it on there, and would be pretty good to go. Except now that these have been shaped down a little bit, it's going to cut right into the bottom of it. So basically I need to put the Sorbo a little bit in here, and it's like, well, just don't use the A or L button, don't use the anti-reversal latch button, but what's the point in having it if you can't use it? So I try to install this. That doesn't work, and it's just like, oh my god, when do things come together anymore? Because they don't seem to come together anymore. Okay, so that's pretty much explained there. Let's go on to the next thing. I already said all those. Modify Ultimate Slide Rails Sanded. Well, I have it in another gun right now, but basically the slide rails are similar to this Blue Onyx, and they're way too fat. For some odd reason, they're way too fat. I put them in any gearbox shell, and they still have some kind of friction. They cannot get in there, and I had to sand this down, sand down the top, sand it on the bottom. I do that on all the sides, and able to get it in, and it works. And the other thing with the Modify is you got to make sure that the teeth, because they're a little bit, it's like they're almost perfect, but then they're not. The teeth have to feed through flawlessly because they're metal and they're one solid rack. If they don't, when you go to shoot it, it's just going to crack, and that or it's going to mess up something else because the gear can't rotate through it easily. So kind of a little experience there with the Modify Ultimate piston. Okay, so we got Sorbo eating next on the list. A lot of people post that, you know, you add Sorbo to your cylinder head. Here's one that's really good condition that I just did last night. Prepping for a really high spring. You can see that's really thick. That is thick. But look at the top of the Sorbo is the original pad that was on the cylinder head. You can already see it's got some markings, but that pad's a lot harder. And so what happens is it doesn't destroy your Sorbo. If you don't have that kind of, take that pad off your cylinder head, put it on top, or a Neo pad, basically put on top there, it will destroy your Sorbo. And you can kind of see that if you took this right here. Imagine attacking it with a screwdriver. I mean, just eat this thing. And most people will say, well, it just doesn't happen to me. This piston head is the one that has done it before. They'll say, well, it has to be sharp, you know, but my experience, it doesn't matter. The impact is impact. It could be for certain other reasons, but this is hitting so hard, best to protect and be overly finished, done. You can think about, sleep on it and shoot it any day you want, just like that. That's perfect. Now this is thick, but it's still, angle of engagement is corrected perfectly with that. I really wanted to use this, but can't, so kind of sucks. I'll probably have to do something else. Rewiring my SIG shorty and DSG. Oh my god, the silver wiring, or we call it the low resistance wiring, has a really bad layer of protection, and I mean it's crap basically. If anything snags against it, if the motor, let's say here's a motor, here's a motor right here. Let's say you have it in your gearbox shell, and in your gearbox shell you have the wires that come down like this, and this motor rubs up in here, and the pinion, let's say, it doesn't even touch that wire, but the shaft does. Every once in a while you take it out, put it in, it rubs up against it, and you can try to heat shrink that area. You can heat shrink the back where the wires come out, but they still clip very freaking easily. I mean, it's retarded. Basically, that's what needs to be said. You have to heat shrink the whole line, and it's just, what the heck. So you buy your own wire, you buy nice wire, and you solder that. And I don't want to use this wire because it heats up more than the good wire, the low resistance wire. But you pick your battles basically. You can Dremel out sections, make more space, but then with like my SIG shorty, which is down there on the floor in the gun case, what happens is there's no room for the wire, so I hook it up, and for whatever reason it's supposed to use 18 gauge, and 18 gauge is small. But the pistol grip was pre-dremeled, the whole inside, so like here's the pistol grip right here. I basically dremeled like the whole section here for the SIG, and still no room. It's just ridiculous. So I'd have wires clipping, have to replace it, have to replace it, have to replace it. Now it just gets very annoying, and then eventually you get to the point where you're like, I'm just going to do my own modification just to make it work. So I'll take like this shell, for example. I cut out this whole section back here like this so that all the wires can go through. Whoa. So that all the wires can go through there, and I'm just like, I'm done with that. That's what I'm going to do. It's just a part in the design that there's not really any room for wiring. So it kind of sucked for me. It was basically just failure, failure, and failure, and then finally, okay, not clipping anymore. Sanding air nozzle for bucking to fit. Basically, here's your bucking, here's an air nozzle, and these are two different brands. It doesn't fit very well. Is it worth sanding this to make it fit this? Not really, because it's a little bit of imperfections, so I wouldn't even suggest trying that. I've tried it, and it's just not very good. Better off to get the same brand. Tried to change a pinion, shaved too much, and had to cut it. Well, so here's your motor, and I was trying to shave the pinion so I could fit it underneath the Dsg bevel, because I'm like, I really don't want to buy another shell. And this goes back from my experience of saying, you know, if you cut this down too much, you're not going to have any teeth, even though it will fit. It just won't be functional. So here you cut down the teeth too much, and you get it in there, and you're like, well, I'm not even going to try it because I know that's not going to be functional. But even with some teeth here, you try to put this on a pinion pulley, and a pinion pulley uses the teeth to pull this off. So I'm like, oh, now I really can't do anything here. So I Dremel off down the middle, pull the pinion out because it's no good anyways anymore. Cut the shaft to a medium shaft, because as you're cutting here, you kind of cut into the shaft. You're trying to avoid it, but what can you do? Cut it, put a medium, and put a pinion on it, and then now it's a medium motor, and I use it for my Sig Shorty. So that's how I basically ended up with an M180 Satan that nobody has as a medium or sells in a gun like that. So let's go next thing. Just going to try and knock these out because there's a lot here. Bushings and gear axles not parallel or level. Oh my god. So you remove the debris or whatever, and you put the bushing or bevel in, and it's still not flat. I mean, I just like, what the hell? So you look at it, and you kind of just Dremel very slightly, or you shave it, you sand it down just to try to make it flat. And you have to look at the bushing or bearing just to make sure that they're flat. I mean, that's just a, what the heck when you get that kind of issue. Tried to change, okay, we already talked about that. Selector not working because of the spur gear axle. Okay, I made a video of that recently, and basically what happened is here's your gearbox shell, and here is the selector that would go across here, and here's your axle for the spur gear. Comes out too far, and usually you get these issues when you go from different brands to brands because their axles are made for a different shell or something. So it would stick out too far, and the selector would hit into it, and it would stop the selector eventually from functioning correctly and create problems, and just have to Dremel off a small section. Then no problem. So let's move on here. Dremeling gearbox multiple times and getting too much material in the bearings. Wow, that's happened probably twice to me, and I decided I just will not do it anymore. Basically, I used to glue the bearings in and bushings in right away, and then I realized it's just not worth it. What you should do is put everything together, make sure everything goes together, and glue them very last. The reason for that is when you're shimming, you can glue them in, but you need to make sure that there's not any other dremeling you need to do. Here is a small little Dremel section right here, just so that the spring to the cutoff would function better. For some reason, the G&Gs bash right into that and create a problem with your cutoff, and that's stock. I mean, just other shells will have that already pre-moved, so something that I guess they didn't notice, and they just left it in the gun. Try to keep where we were there. So basically I Dremel it, and then the stuff would get into the bearings and you'd have to remove it, and it would just be a pain in the ass. So you would try to cover it, put something there and like tape over it, and then just cut around, and you would get it in here and here. I mean, just ridiculous. So you have to remove everything, clean everything, remove the wires and so forth. And basically now what I do is I just have everything out. I won't even go for taping. I just take everything out instead. I just tape everything down and make sure that, okay, I won't get any dirt in here and here, no debris in there. But just take everything out and do all the cutting and dremeling first. If you need some special holes, markings, whatever. So next thing, pistol grip is wrong dimension and needs to be special shimmed or shaved. We saw this probably not too or was pretty recent, but we can see this pistol grip has been shaved down. The reason for that is because when it would come up into the body, there was this gap that it would create between the pistol grip and the gearbox shell. So your shimming would be a little bit off when you put it in the body. So you would cut this down or sand it so that it would go up and it would be flush. Another way that I kind of talked about how I got away from that was I used a screw and put shims on the top here, basically copying. And so when you did this to the gearbox shell, you would have those shims there, and it would copy the gap basically. So you could have done either way. That way you might have to cut the spring on the motor just to get the pinion to mesh here correctly, because it's a little farther away, and when you get the motor closer and closer, that spring compresses and it kind of leaves spacing in the way. But you could just sand this down until it fits in the body with this completely flat like that, and then you're good to go. You can take the body out, screw this together, and you wouldn't have a meshing problem when you put it back in the body. But you got to make that perfect, because this will show on your gearbox, and it drives me nuts when I can see the gearbox shell through the pistol grip. Gearbox dremeling to make the body fit. Gosh, take this gearbox here. It's not made for some certain body shell brand, and you've got all these markings and things that are not even used. I don't know why. G&G has done this too. It's not on this shell, but you'll see stuff here that's just like it's a shell made for various other things, but it goes in your M4 body and it's not used. So with a VFC gearbox shell, I had all these weird things here, and I just clipped them all down so I can make it work. No failure there. It was all good, but you just have to kind of look at it and say, okay, that's not going to be a failure, no problem. Because it kind of makes you wonder, is it still going to fit in there if I do this? Should I do this? Basically, you want to be 100% sure before you start. Should I do this? Will I do this? Because then you're going to learn after the experience, was it worth it or not? That's basically what it's going to come down to. So, next thing, gearbox dremeling, cylinder window to fit bore up. Sometimes the bore up, where is one right here, will not fit in your gearbox shell. So you have to dremel around these areas and make them fit, basically. That doesn't really go wrong. There's not really failure with that. But then that could create a problem with your tap-up plate. Here's a Dsg tap-up plate. You can see that it has been marked all across here because it would bump into the bore up. You could just see it needs the space. See there. So that had to be done. It's just really annoying there. I've had to sand the front because the gearbox shell is too thick in the front. I've had to sand the back here, this area, so that it can actually properly go to the forward position. And those are annoying things. Moving on to the next thing, gearbox dremeling pinholes to fit the pins. So here's a pinhole right here. There's a pinhole right here. To put it in the body, put your pins in, and they don't go in. You're like, oh my god. You gotta pull this out, pull everything out, tape this up, and just shave those with a Dremel tool and probably a drill bit. So moving on to the next thing, piston tooth or gear shaving. Am I looking at the right spot? Kind of a little tired this morning. Dremeling post and sections for gears to move freely. That's what's next. This post will sometimes get in the way of a gear. There's a post right here, so you shave off just a tiny bit. Sometimes you'll shave off the here for the tappet plate, and it goes back right here. It'll knock, the gear will knock into this sometimes with the tappet cam, so you gotta shave that down. Those are annoying things that just kind of happen to me. You're not gonna have any failure doing that. If you do them, they'll still work for you. So go on to O-ring air nozzle, adding to metal air nozzle. I've actually done this to plastic too, and been quite successful with it, but you have to be very I've actually never failed at it, so I guess I can't just say quite successful, just successful every time. But you have to have enough material before you add an O-ring inside. So you've got your small little O-ring right here, and the air nozzle. The air nozzle doesn't have an O-ring in it, so you decide, okay, I'll take a little. What I use is a little Dremel with a drill bit, and I just go around on the inside very slowly, just and then you have this little section that you can put the O-ring in. You can put the O-ring in and super glue the outer a little bit if you want to. I actually put it in and keep it in there, because what you do is you go up just a little bit higher and you make the hole there. And so when you put the O-ring in, it actually sits in there and will not come out. I've done this to a metal air nozzle for the SIG Shorty, and improved the air seal 100% because you know, having that O-ring there. I've done it to other plastic ones, and it's just totally worth it. Sometimes you get an O-ring that's just a little bit too big, it won't go in. You can just shave a little bit around the edge and pop it right in. So I've been very successful with that, but you have to be careful, or been 100% successful. You just have to be careful there's enough material. You look at it and say, okay, is this worth it? So move on to the next thing. No bearings for either side of the gearbox. SIG never had it. Bent AEG spring. Oh my gosh. So you're supposed to have, here's an AEG spring. You're supposed to have bearings on one or the other side. The reason is because if this somehow gets stuck and it just cannot rotate, freely rotate, what happens is as it's shooting, it starts to bend the spring in an awkward shape, kind of like this. And with the bearings on one or the other, or both, but if you have a high-speed piston setup, you probably don't want to put bearings in your piston if you're afraid of pre-engagement with a low power spring. So you would just not put them in there. You'd put them at the back, and this thing would try to spin out the back. But basically, if you have none completely on either side, your AEG spring can get really like this, messed up. And imagine buying a gun that doesn't have any, and then you open up your gun and the spring's like oh my gosh, you know, why didn't they put that in there? So then you have to do it. That's kind of just really a pissant thing. You're just like, I just bought this brand new. What the heck? Okay, so tap-up plate shaving for bore-up, already talked about that. Sector gear adding more space for tap-up cam to go back further, already kind of talked about that. Let's say you want to add a little bit of, to this gear right here where the tap-up cam is, you want to add a little bit of JV weld. It will work. You just have to sand down the area, clean it, scorch it basically, put the JV weld there, let it set, pre-Dremel it, hand test it, see where your tap-up plate's going, back and forth and everything, and it actually will work. It won't work on a piston though. The reason for a piston is because here's a piston that I try to do it to, and don't worry about these cuts, that's for something else. But I try to put it on there, I let it dry, everything, I prepped it up, and the JB Weld just does not hold to that material. It might hold to like metal, but this white GMP piston, it just didn't hold to this plastic material. It probably wouldn't hold to some of the other plastics. So that was kind of failure, basically. Even though I thought it might not, I just tried to salvage. You try to salvage your piston before it gets worse, and it's just let it get worse. I mean, at least try something. So the thing about the JB Weld is if it had actually stayed on, it would have worked. The problem is it just doesn't stay on. It doesn't bind to it very well. Even if you try to create these indentions and you sand it and everything, it's the plastic for some reason. But the indentation on the JB Weld, there was none there. There was none. It just flaked off eventually off this thing. So where, like, let's say your JB Weld's here holding this section together, this just flakes out and there's no indentation there. You can put it right back in and it'd be the same. So basically another thing that I tried was putting some Sorbo or putting an O-ring piece in here. And O-ring, this is probably more of the size. The O-ring worked for some time. So I'll put it in here like this, and you can see that actually fits in the gearbox because it's pre-cut like that, and it provides a nice cushion right here, and it makes this this tooth good to go. So your sector hits into that, and it works for quite some time until eventually this O-ring just gets eaten up, and it's because the gear bashing into it. It's just a sharp gear hitting into something soft. It eventually cuts it down, and no good. So that was kind of just a failure. Basically, when you're dealing with these hard teeth like this, from my experience here telling you this, just get a better piston. I noticed that this GMP white's not nearly as good as the Lonix blue because the material is much easier to cut here. This is much harder material to cut. So, you know, it's much better material. They're about the same price. Why pay for the white? Get the blue Lonix. So, moving on. What else do we got? Tappet plate. I already said that. Sector gear adding more space. Okay. D-Boy's pinion, loose but fixed. I've only once seen this. I was working on a D-Boy's Scar. I've worked on many other guns. Many other guns. Friends' guns, other people's guns. So here we go. Here's a pinion, and it's a D-type, let's say, for example, because those are sometimes just loose. It would just come off as soon as I grabbed it, and the gun jammed, and I could see why, because this thing could not rotate very well. So I Dremel a tiny small hole on the shaft, put it back on, use some red Loctite, and tighten it down, and good to go. You know, just an annoying thing that's done, and just have to. I don't know why they don't put just a tiny little hole so that the screw can get in there. Maybe because the screw would, as it's rotating, get tighter and tighter and not be able to come out. I'm not sure. I've had to do that for my selectors on my SIG because the screws don't have anything to go to. They just touch metal. Like, that's really going to hold with torque. And it's such a small screw, it's like you can't even, come on, be realistic. So moving on to the next thing, fixed stock dremeling. The back of the body, sometimes you have to Dremel just to make the stock go on, and that's annoying itself. Sometimes it's metal that you have to pull out from the gearbox, and you have this metal rod that you have to drill or Dremel. And that I've never had an issue with. I'm trying to think about other issues at the same time, just to kind of talk about all these things this morning. Just feel like talking about things. So moving on, we have pistol grip, adding screws that are longer, adjusting the motor hole by dremeling. So you buy a pistol grip and it doesn't even work for your gun. The motor holes don't even match up right here, and you put it in and you Dremel it just a little bit, shave it so it's nice and straight to put your motor in from one side to the other. And then you notice that the screws aren't even long enough, so you have to go out and buy new screws too. Excuse me. And then you have a problem with sometimes the motor needs to go up higher, so you actually have to Dremel, take your motor right here, and you actually have to Dremel off a small section here so that this can go even higher up. That's a pain in the ass, but I mean, if you really want it to work, you're going to do everything to make it work, especially when that's something you can't really change out or mesh different. You can change the pistol grip, I guess. Already talked about JB welding, the pickup tooth. Wire room for MOSFETs like the VFC Scar H. Okay, my VFC Scar H SSR, I had a MOSFET for it. It was the Murph, and it was basically my first time having a MOSFET. And this is I don't know, sometime last summer, sometime. So I can't remember the exact day or whatever, but it was a while ago. And it's not this summer, it was like of last year, I guess. Anyways, first thing I realized is sometimes it looks like the wires are going to fit and whatever. You get the gun together and then you're like, need to go for plan B, because you get it in there and it's just like, it doesn't fit. So you go a different way, go to the front. And eventually I wasn't happy with it being wired to the front. I mean, I thought, oh, that would be great because I don't have to put it in the back of the stock. And then I was like, no, I don't like it being in the front because it's heavy. It makes it look awkward. It kind of bends down. You see these wires coming out of it. So in the end, I kind of was like, I didn't want to do this. I wanted the MOSFET, but I didn't want to do that. So I just took that out and then wired it for the back of the stock, and I had to spend time dremeling and drilling a hole for it to put all those wires in. So basically, if you're thinking about getting a MOSFET for your gun, you first should decide how much room it has and where you're going to put it if you're going to do it, because that's going to be a definite issue. Pulling ARL for gears and failing. The ARL stands for anti-reversal latch. I just usually put ARL. So you've got your gun set up, and this is back when I first started teching. I was reading the things that you can do. Pulling the anti-reversal latch when your piston is all the way to the back is not a good idea, especially with a strong spring. It's not stated really, but just from my experience, I'm telling you, don't do it. The reason for that being is because as it winds back really fast, and sometimes the anti-reversal latch relocks up into the bevel and just snaps the anti-reversal latch, snaps your bevel gear. I've seen the teeth on these things snap too. So what I do now, as more of a professional way to do it, is you put a screwdriver through the front of your piston here, and you push it back as you let go of the anti-reversal latch. And if your sector gear can be spun by moving the bevel a little bit, then you can pass it and pull the screwdriver out and let it come to the front. You could even quickly, if you're really good and it's not too strong of a spring, you can just do that motion, and as you do that, it actually makes the gear do this pass, and you can just bring it out. Definitely better than pulling the anti-reversal latch. A lot safer, less stressful. So that's just kind of a good experience from my failure of trying to do something that you think you're doing right but is not. Very good to do. Okay, so keep going. Electrical taping pistol end plate. Earlier I had an end plate, and basically this was a really good success. It was my first time doing it, and I'd probably recommend it if you have the space for it. Take your end plate, sand it down all the way around here, and electrical tape it, and super glue it to it. Now your end plate can't get these indentations and short circuit your motor or your wires or whatever is touching here. And I would double heat shrink. I put more heat shrink. I put more on there on the connectors, and the reason for that is if they are sharp, like which I just had discovered a little bit ago, about a week ago maybe, that the connectors would hit into this if your motor is violently spinning like this, trying to, and they would rip because they're sharp. So you put more heat shrink, put some electrical tape on here and you won't have an electrical short. I don't understand why these are metal and then painted. It's just a bad design. It needs to stop. Just basically that's it. It needs to be plastic in this area, some really hard plastic, something like this. It's Lonex plastic, and you can make it, I guess, screw onto metal or something, but definitely not. Do not bake those anymore. Please don't. Maybe because this screw needs metal. Maybe that's why. But if they're going to do it, at least, what's the word I'm trying to say? Pad that somehow, because I've had to do it a couple times. I just usually, even these come down, they hit the motor in the wrong spot and create a short, so I'll Dremel these out and make the shape that I need. So moving on, let's see here. GMP screw-in motor terminals. I'm going to say from my experience, I do not use them anymore. I thought they were awesome. It was a great concept, but when you've got some crappy material, the screws would strip very easily, and especially would strip out of the tower. That's where the GMP motor screw-in terminals go. They have drilled a little hole and you just screw on your wires. Pretty good concept, great, except that the material was really bad, and you would just tighten a little bit and the screws would strip and just the whole thing was just shit, basically. So I decided to stop doing that because it was just bad. It seemed like a great concept, but it was not, material was not good enough. If you buy a GMP stock gun and you've got it screwed on there, don't even screw it tight a little bit more, because it starts stripping the screws or the inside of the tower. It's just crap. It's not very well made on that part. Multiple stripped or fallen apart screws. King Arms, my King Arms Civic. I'm not even going to tighten it. I just put it in and I'm about to close it up, and the screw just splits in half. I mean, you take it out, it's like, okay, now it's a little bit, what the hell, gotta go buy new screws. You tighten just a little bit and it just rips the material. Just a little bit. You're like hand tightening. Terrible material for screws. I haven't had that issue with the D-Boys. I haven't worked on many D-Boys, so, but King Arms, I just like, no more. I can't take this. If you're going to use cheap screws, I can't take it. Even if you're trying to be careful, it still happens. Okay, so anti-reversal latch malfunctioning after test. Get your gun all together, got your anti-reversal latch here, and it seems to be working. Put the gearbox together, you rotate the gear, seems to be working. And what happens is the shell is just a little bit so close that when you put it in the body, and sometimes there's other things that kind of compress it, the anti-reversal latch can't move correctly anymore. It's just stuck. So the gears rotate and then they'll back wind and so forth. So I actually open these up, and sometimes I Dremel off just a little bit off right here. It doesn't hurt, and your anti-reversal latch will never have an issue again. Make sure to watch out for the debris and clean that out so it doesn't get in your gear, in any other components of your gearbox shell. I already talked about the back of the Lonex being hit by the sector gear. When you use the ARL button, or you're pulling an ARL. Replacing piston head that was screwed on too tight with extra washers that did not fit. For some reason, I was opening up the D-Boys SCAR that I was working on, and it was like a plastic piston for garter. Something like this. And I don't know why. There's bearings that go in here. Somebody put extra washers with that. So they had the piston head here, and the extra washers do not really fit right here. They fit so tight that the guy had to have jammed it in there with a screwdriver. And it took the front of the piston here and just split it like this, because it just couldn't fit, and they tried to do it. And the piston head was screwed on tight, and open it up, and it was just about ready to fail. And I'm just like, oh man. whoever did that shouldn't have done that. I was fixing someone else's gun that was supposedly teched by somebody else, so just didn't make any sense to me. Why add extra weight in the front of the piston at the same time? You're destroying the piston because they don't even fit. They just jammed it in there. I guess that was stupidity, I don't know. Bucking's cut on the wrong side of installation. I don't understand this either. I was working on 2 scars, both from the Evike Awesome something celebration fan thing, and it was just a mystery box, and it was, one was my brother-in-law's, one was a friend's, and they both had the bucking lips cut at the wrong section. I opened it up, and the front here where the lips are, they actually cut that off. Just cut it off. So you get your mystery box and your scar, and you're like, well, I'm having a feeding issue. Open it up, I'm just like, oh my god, what the hell? What the hell? Who does that? So, go ahead and replace them. You always cut the back end, because that's the part where you put the C-clip and it may not go in. You don't cut this freaking front. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So, there was that. Buckings have huge percentage, but lower feet per second. Okay, example with this was, at the same time I'm scratching my head because the buckings were made for something like a 70 or 80%. Who knows what they really were for. When you go to shoot with a 2-gram BB and your feet per second is only 350 to under 400, 2-gram BB and you're no hop up, it shouldn't be doing this. Yeah, you go shoot your BB and it just goes to the sky. You're like, how the hell does that pass anywhere? Factory, something, I don't know. Maybe it was pre-teched before the person got it. Twice it was the same. I think they're Echo 1 Scar H's, and didn't make any sense to me why they had done that. So I had changed the bucking, or yeah, just changed the bucking actually. Some of the arms were a little bit pressing too much, were made that way, so I actually carved the inside a little bit, and I never had any failure with that. That worked perfectly to fix that issue. So when you shot with 2.0s, no hop, they had the drop they're supposed to, and then you could adjust and they could go where they needed to. But that's just trying to tell somebody you need to shoot with 3.0s, some point higher than that, but it's such low feet per second that when you're going to play it, a lot of these places we're only using 2 grams. Even they'll even say only 2 to 2.5 grams can be used. So I don't understand how you would expect somebody to use a really high gram for that low feet per second, especially when they may not even allow you to use it at the place you're playing. So that was kind of cruddy, but fixed. Lips are too long. Alright, bucking lips are too low and cannot feed in the BB hop-up chamber. Oh, I know what I meant by that. I kind of wrote this when I was tired last night, but basically these lips come up a certain way into the hop-up chamber, and they're too long, and so because of that the BBs can't get in there and feed properly. And this was I think it was Prometheus Barrel with a Prometheus bucking hard type, and because it's harder, it's not soft, it couldn't bump it out of the way and get the BBs in there, so it wouldn't even feed. Kind of crummy. So what I did is just pulled that out and not used it. Or I could have, I guess, tried to Dremel it down, but again, you're messing with the air seal, buddy. Okay, so Element Brass Spring Guide. Don't get an Element Brass Spring Guide. I put that in my SIG, and right away it started bending the back. I mean, it was brass. It wasn't solid steel. It just bent, and I was like, oh my god. So I just bent it, made it straight, put it back in. Basically, don't take it out at an angle at all. You just can't do that because it just bends it completely. For now, it's working perfectly, but that was kind of a pain in the ass. MOSFET not protecting LiPo batteries, and short circuits created by design flaw. Pistol grips. Okay, the MRF MOSFET, I love it, but I have to admit, when there's flaws things, and there's things you don't like. So the thing I don't like about the MRF MOSFET is after emailing and finally getting an answer or reply, it only protects up to the 160 amp. Okay, 160 amps. This is a 100 amp battery. This thing's freaking huge. Can you imagine having a battery that supplies 160 amps? I don't get it. Okay, could have stated that it supplied that, or that's where it was the cutoff. So if I'm using something like this little LiPo and it short circuits, goodbye LiPo, because there's no way to protect this. The MOSFET will protect itself, but it will not protect your LiPo battery. It's basically false advertising that says it will protect, but it doesn't state what it protects. And then the pistol grip, I kind of already explained that sometimes they're designed poorly. They touch the motor and they get short, and that's where, like, I had a small LiPo hooked up to a MRF MOSFET and it just died, and then found out later, okay, you just find out more information about what kind of amperage it does protect and doesn't. So it wouldn't trip at the 30 or 40 amps for the poor battery. It'd only trip at 160, so that battery's getting fried. So basically just something to learn from that. Let's go into seller soldered Deans. So I got a battery, it was this one right here, and he soldered the Deans on with reverse polarity, so I had to take it off and solder it myself, and that was kind of just annoying, but got it done. Well, basically this is just kind of a what the hell moment. You open up your brand new gun and you notice it's not brand new. I've had that happen before. You open up your gun that you're supposed to have and it's not even the gun you're supposed to have. Had that happen before. Height adjustment moving and wire coming loose. I hate that. So your height adjustment here screw is kind of a little bit loose, and so it will rotate by itself while you're shooting a gun. And what I do is I super glue the whole top here, and that holds it from doing that so much. You could Teflon tape it, put it in there, but you got to get right height adjustment. And basically that's prevent it measure. And then the inside here, what was I going to say? Oh, the wires to your motor, they're a little too far away, so let's say that's like right here from touching the plate, so it actually comes out from your motor, and so you have to stuff things in here to kind of keep it tugged up against the motor. And that looks like that's finally everything discussed on this piece of paper, which I don't even care anymore about a lot of this stuff. Sorry my whole desk is messed up. I just thought I would talk about a lot of these things here. There's not much more to talk about other than I do remember something that I did write down here, but I guess I didn't talk about. For some reason I didn't. Yeah, somehow I missed these things. Hair trigger modification with too much removal post malfunction. Okay, so the trolleys, if you remove a little bit too much material, like on the trolley arm for a hair trigger mod, you can make it malfunction the way you didn't want it to. So you have to be very careful when doing that. You have to move very slowly. But the reason I actually failed the first time I think I was doing that was I was trying to do it a different way, and I found a better way, an easier way, because I tried. Now, this video I'll probably make pretty soon about how to do that, and the way to do it is an easier way and much quicker way, but you have to be very careful doing it. Otherwise, you're going to need a new trolley. So basically, talked about that. Cutoff allows full auto, but fixed. The cutoff lever, sometimes it can't engage the trolley very well, and the reason for this is because they didn't make it long enough, or the trolley arm is too short, one or the other. And so if you pull most AGs have this problem. I've seen, for my experience, most of them, I almost can say actually all of them. If you pull it just the tiniest bit on semi, you can actually get full auto. And in my experience, it's been all of them so far. But what I'll do is I'll add some JB weld to the cutoff, and it will grab it when you try to do semi. So you go semi, boom, semi, semi, semi. It won't go full auto. So you can try to go like this, it'll still be semi, semi, semi. Okay, other things that were missed there, let's see. Oh man, don't you love when you do a perfect job on a gun, you get everything all set up and everything, and the person jams the barrel with BBs. Somehow they're crap BBs or some debris or something gets in there. And they keep firing and firing and firing, and basically you get your gearbox shell back, and the bushings, the bearings, whatever, everything in here, even the gear, not this one, but a different one, the axles get bent, the bushing gets really messed up, and the teeth to the piston or the sector, wow. Basically, if you've got a real jam, if you've got BBs in your barrel, stop shooting. That's just bottom line, stop shooting. Don't use crap BBs. Do not use crap BBs. You just use some good BBs, don't get any dirt in there, otherwise you're going to be opening up your gun and you're just going to be, wow, I just got to drop another 20 bucks for something and something else to fix that. So don't do that. Let's see, did I miss anything else there? Nope, that's not missed anymore. So basically there's things I have tried and have been successful with, and the things that I have tried and failed with. Basically, like I talked about, the O-ring and sorbo to your piston. Tried, have failed with that. The thing I'm going to try is putting sorbo on the back of the piston. I don't know how well that's going to hold, to be honest. Other things that I've tried is, like, if it doesn't fit the shell, try to make it fit the shell. I basically, sum it up, I wouldn't even try it anymore. If something doesn't fit, if the piston doesn't fit because the rack is too close, don't even go. I'm not even going to keep trying, because I know what's going to happen is they're not going to mesh together good anymore, and then they're not going to be useful. So one or the other, I'm going to destroy both of them basically in the process. So I just won't use it. Same goes for modifying a shell. If you just cannot get it to fit, and it's because the shell is just too small. So let's say your bearings are flat and you drop in a gear and it just cannot fit in there. Okay, you can't even put shims, nothing. It doesn't even rotate when the gearbox is closed, it's just too tight. What should you do? Don't even try drumming the shell, it's not freaking worth it. It's just not. Don't even try drumming around the axle, because you're going to really compromise the axle just to try to make sure it fits in there. In that case, just take the gear out, use it for some other gun. That's just the point there. Same for an air nozzle. If air nozzle doesn't work, just get a bucking that goes with that air nozzle. Stop messing around, okay? You could even install an R-hop after you get the right bucking to air nozzle combination. So you could go around these things and do whatever. I think that's pretty much it. As far as some things I've had bad luck and some things that I've tried that went bad. And just talking about things. And pretty much now I gotta get ready for work. Yeah. I don't really care for that job anymore. I mean, it just is what it is. I love doing this stuff. All these complications and everything kind of just drive me to try to do better, make everything work perfectly, and which I do get successful at making a gun that's really messed up work good, and that's because of a lot of experience, a lot of guns being taken apart, a lot of just sitting down, looking at it, and just making it perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and get going, and maybe we'll talk about some other stuff later. just for my channel. This is just going to be these things that, random things that we talk about, I guess, for now. So I'll catch you guys later and hit you with a fist.